Ladies and gentlemen, it seems to have been an interesting day so far because I can hear a lot of conversation still going on, but it would be nice if you could just gather together now for this second plenary of the Ideas Lab. We are trying to look again ahead for Europe. As you know, Europe's choice is our theme this year. And we have an excellent lineup for this second plenary because the former Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni has agreed to give some introductory remarks. And then we have an excellent panel which will comment and enlarge and hopefully discuss lively, perhaps even disagree, on what choice Europe should actually make. We have Andrea Metelko-Zgombic from Croatia, State Secretary, Frederick Reinfeldt, former Prime Minister of Sweden, and also a member of the board of SEPS, so he can represent also, I wouldn't say the thinking of the House, but the thinking which is going on in the House. And I hope you have all seen this publication which we have issued these days on what's ahead basically for the new Commission, what choices it should make, and how one should look back at this self-defined political commission. And perhaps you have seen that one of the members of the Commission has today a big op-ed defending this concept of this political commission. But of course, in this plenary, second plenary, we will not talk about the Commission only, but we will have a much wider view, which will also be provided by Jacek Czaputowicz, who is the Foreign Minister of Poland. And as you see, we have been trying really to get a diverse collection of views on the podium. And I hope we will have an interesting discussion here. Time permitting, we will also then ask you to give us your own comments and questions. But for the time being, I just wanted to ask Prime Minister Gentiloni to please come here and give us his first introductory remarks. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and thank you, all of you, for this opportunity, for your invitation. Few remarks. My first point, I think we have to be aware of an obvious fact, but important to stress in this moment. What is the story of the European success? The EU success was only an economics success story, or was it a political success? And even from my point of view, and many of you, I imagine, a political model for the world. It was a political success and a political model for the world. So the challenge that we have now is to understand if and how, at least to begin to discuss, if and how this political success can continue in a global environment very different and very challenging for the European Union for several reasons that we all know. Can we continue this political success, or can we avoid irrelevance of Europe at the global level, and how? Because history did not finish, and history came back in Europe choosing perhaps as main actors the national states and not the Union. This is the story of the last 10 to 15 years. At the end of the last century, we had the idea of a general economic and peaceful progress. And then we had, in the last 15 to 20 years, a strong return of history, but choosing as main actors national states. So the challenge for the Union, how to continue to play a global role, a global relevant role on our values, is there. Obviously, we are also facing an internal challenge on these values. It is not only a geopolitical challenge connecting Europe to the rest of the world. It is an internal challenge, and we have some experience of this in my country. The challenge comes from, this is my opinion, obviously from the rise of this national populism. I think we have to look to the national populism in a very close way. If you look closely, and we have an experience in Italy, I think we have to know that there is no common ground in the different forms of national populism in Europe concerning several of our main issues. There is no common ground on foreign policy. For example, some of the parties of our national populistic coalition in office in Italy are very good friends of Russia, to be a little bit short. This is not very much loved by other nationalistic governments in Eastern Europe, for example. They don't share the same view on economy, not at all. They don't share the same view even on migration. They don't share the same view on EU budget. Some are coming from net contributors nation, others are coming from nations with a different position towards the EU budget. They have a common ground, and the common ground could be wrapped up with the slogan, take back control. As you know, it was the claim of the Brexit campaign in UK. So if there is a common ground in the national populist race in Europe, the common ground is take back control. And from my opinion, I perfectly understand the reasons of several countries having this point strong in their internal politics, but I have to be very open saying that take back control means the end of the European Union. And I think that those that have in mind the European Union as a political project, those who are stressing the values of European Union should be very clear on this. Take back control was Brexit for Britons, but means the end of the project of the European Union. You cannot have together the fact that each member state again take in his hands all the powers of decisions and the continuation of our project. At the opposite, I think that we need a political relaunch based on value. Our values are not values of the past, useful for my generation, the so-called baby boomers. We had peace, we had prosperity. Okay. Our values are contemporary values. Our values are values for the future. Why? Because this turmoil of the history that we are living in is again putting at the center of the stage very relevant things. So things like free trade, peace, liberal democracy are at stake. Our value, multilateralism, the welfare state, liberal democracy, multilateralism, are not, as perhaps we have presented them in the recent past, the result of 60 years of European Union. They are the key values of the future. If we are not aware of the fact that the dynamics discussing the connection between democracy and the rule of law are there all over the world and in Europe, if we are not aware of the dangers of the dynamics in the confrontation between US and China, for example, but many other areas of the world, and the need of a quiet superpower, as Europe was called, if you are not aware of the threat of free and fair trade in the world now, if we are not aware of the fact that this wonderful European acquis, which is the welfare state, is in discussion in several countries, I think that we are not looking to the world as it is. How, and to my final remark, how can we try to begin a relaunch, political relaunch based on values and on policies of the Union? Well, the answer is not easy, and perhaps we are not in the right moment to give this answer. I hope that the meeting that will take place in May will be a successful one, but the timing of the meeting is already a problem because there is an electoral campaign going on. It's not the perfect moment to have ambitious discussion. But how do we, what are the steps that we should try to do? I have not a receipt, obviously. I will only mention three things. One is an institutional strategy. I think that we should practice what we wrote in several documents. In some strategic areas, we need to practice different level of integration among the 27 members of the Union. We cannot continue in a stalemate where every single state is able to block the process. Obviously, the door should remain open to everybody. I don't accept the idea of a core Europe deciding against the others, but I can't accept even also the idea of a continuous stalemate. Second, I think that we have to be clear in our discussion going on since several years on the perspective of our economy. I just underline two things. One, EU among the global players is by far the player with the lowest level of public debt. And second, EU is among the global players by far the one with the weakest political economy, pro-growth, pro-jobs, stimulating economy. Is this okay? The result of this reality is functioning? Is it reducing the differences in Europe? Is it functioning even for the countries that have supported this strategy since many years? First of all, Germany. Is it working? Or do we need perhaps more active stimulus, more expansionist and fiscal policies? as in all the other relevant global economic player of the world? Question mark. Maybe it's an Italian point of view. I am Italian, sorry. Final, we need, I find very interesting, Daniel, you used the definition, we need a migration union. Ambitious, but we need an ambitious approach to the migration issue. I can't accept the idea that we go on 2 or 3 years discussing on the Dublin rules, for the simple reason, one, that we will not find an agreement at 27, I fear, on the Dublin rules. And second, to be very open to you, dear friends, because the Dublin rules are dedicated only to a minor fraction of the migration issue that we will have to face in the next 10 to 20 years. If you like it or not, the big majority of migrants coming in Europe in the next 10 to 20 years will be not asylum seekers. They will not have right to the asylum. They will be economic migrants. We are saying with our rules that economic migrants do not exist. Okay. But they exist. In the migration flows coming in my country, they were in the last 2 or 3 years, 85%, more or less, of migration. What do we think? That giving some money to Africa will close this flow? If we believe this, we are completely wrong. I could even say the opposite. At least for several years, if economic condition in some relevant African country will go better, we will have not less, but more migration flows. Because those choosing to migrate frequently are not the lowest part of the social pyramids of these countries, are those with a smartphone and with a few $100s to try their way. So the issue is, for a big political global player as Europe is, if we can manage to shift migration from illegal, criminal, dangerous for migrants in a safe, organized, with quotas, and possibly matching the needs of our economies. Are we able to do this? Or it is a challenge too big for us, and we should continue in the next 5 years to discuss if the Dublin rules applying only to asylum seekers are sufficient or not sufficient. I am in favor of relocation of refugees and of all the decisions that the Commission took in the last years on refugees, but they were not fulfilled, they were not applied. Okay, we can solve the issue of Dublin, but I think we have to look to the bigger picture. Poverty lost 1,200,000,000 people in the last 20 years, but they were from Asia and Latin America. In Africa, poverty augmented in the last 20 years, 150 million people. So we will have migration from Africa in the next years. We have politicians saying that they are abolishing migration, but we know that it is not true. At least it depends on history, geography. So one of the points of this ambitious relaunch of Europe is migration union capable to transform what is illegal, criminal, not safe, and disturbing all our political environments in each European countries into something that is managed, safe, and useful for our economies, because our economies needs migration. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for having given us not only an overall picture, but also talked about some of the more sensitive subjects to which I'm sure some of the people in this round will come back. I propose we follow the order which we have at least partially on the written program. And we start with you, State Secretary Zangovic. You will be holding the presidency next year. Maybe that gives you a concrete angle of what choices Europe should make then.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent introductory speech. It singled out all challenges we are facing, and this is something which our leaders in Sibiu and during the European Council in May will have to deal with and come up with some ideas how to go forward. Yes, Croatia is going to have the presidency in the first half of 2020. We are fully aware that we are having our presidency in the time of a new institutional cycle, so it is yet to be seen how the European Parliament elections will pass, what kind of parliament we are going to have, European Commission established, and definitely Croatia is ready to contribute to the European project in the circumstances which will at that time be in place. Yes, we have to ask ourselves what kind of Europe we really want to have and to develop, and this is our chance now when we have a new cycle in front of us. Let's talk about European identity. Maybe we can talk about European identity, which is based on the core values which are provided in the treaties. Our core values together make basis for our common culture, I would say. We have a common history, common values, common ideas in the past, and this is something which we need to have also in the future. But on the other hand, Europe has always been united in differences. We also need to take into account national particularities, and this is our challenge. We see that we need European Union as a global actor, as a strong global actor to be able to promote and to protect interests of our EU member states, our citizens. But for having this, we also need to be strong inside. And how to achieve it? Yes, it is definitely a big question. But we believe, let's say my government believes, that we should be inclusive, that Croatia, as the youngest EU member state, wants to be part of core of Europe. We are finalizing our preconditions, technical one, to join Schengen, although this Schengen is not the one which used to be in the past. But we still believe, and it's good to have someone on board waiting and having wanting to enter Schengen to contribute to security and safety, which is highly on our agenda. Inclusiveness in the way that each and every state needs to be able to choose when and in which way it makes a step further. Croatia's priorities, I think, will develop it by the end of this year, but we see it in development, economic growth. We would like to see measures which would combat demographic challenges EU member states and Croatia is facing. We would like to see employment and education more linked to innovation, and this would raise European Union's competitiveness in general. But for being strong abroad, as a global actor, we need to work and to be strong inside. And we really believe that cohesion, development and cohesion as the traditional policy has more value and worth than ever. Because only if you develop, if you converge, then you can also contribute to a well-functioning a single market and the whole European project, I would say. Protecting the values, but also protecting our identity, which is a mosaic of our individuals. Having said that, you can really rest assured that Croatian government is very pro-European. Our Prime Minister is one of the greatest advocates in building modern Europe, and I hope, and I would say we'll do our best to contribute to this project during our presidency.
So no take back control.
No take back real control, because I think Brexit can serve as an excellent example how things may become if you really try to come back control in this globalized world. And we should learn from this experience, from this case, and just let me maybe finalize. We have involved, our government also has been involved in this dialogue with citizens dialogue, and we realized that we really need to go back to our citizens and to remind them the values that European Union brings to us. And I think Croatia, as the youngest EU member state, which had to fought the war in the heart of Europe, beginning of the 90s, is the one who can really witness how important peace is, which then can create conditions for prosperity and for better life for our citizens. And I think it is our common task to provide better life to our citizens and to European ideas as such.
It is good to hear that there's at least some member countries where this theme is not so prevalent. But actually I wanted to put this issue also to Fredrik and my other speakers here. Take back control. There's also those who say we can actually take back control by forging a closer union. That we count more in this uncertain world if we have a stronger EU. So could one sell that? And that I'm asking the people here who have held political responsibility. Can you sell the idea that you can actually take back control better by having a stronger European Union?
I think that the problem with the control word in that sense is more politicians talking about which politicians should have the power and which should not. And that's not always what people are talking about. I think the main problem is that the clash of titans in the world, we have two superpowers, one on the west of Europe, one on the east, which is trying to tell us that they have a set of values that we should follow. One is saying, let's have state-run capitalism, no freedom of speech, strong men based on strong nationalism. And you can choose which you think I'm talking about. And the other one is saying, yes, absolutely, a strong man based on nationalism, breaking down multilateralism, moving over to deal-making where the strong one tells the weaker one what to do. And the first thing Europe should not do is to follow and try to become what they are. And I think we see a lot of signs of Europe trying to do that, asking for strong men, asking for breaking down the institutions that we have had. That would be the real mistake. I thought it was very interesting when Frans Timmermans asked the question about rule of law yesterday, for those you were here. He took for granted that rule of law means European institutions controlling nation states. I could say outside of Brussels, no one is referring to rule of law as controlling nation states. Rule of law is a concept linked to individual freedoms and individual integrity. And there is where we have to start. Because what they are challenging now is that we should give away our individual rights and freedoms and become part of the people. The people that is represented by the strong leader, the people that is one. And where freedom in expression means the right to share the leader, otherwise to shut up. And this kind of movement that we see is a real challenge to what I see as the European values. But I think it has to be more defined out from the individual perspective and less out from which political level should take all the decisions if we are to bring people into this discussion. I think we have a lot of challenges. We have a discussion when it comes to migration as if the only problem that we have in Europe is that we are flooded with people and that we are too many. I think the next discussion will be the opposite. We are populating Europe, decreasing the population of this part of the world. We should find a way of increasing rather than speaking about keeping people out. We have a lot of problems relating to competitiveness, but at the heart of competitiveness lies issues like unit labor cost, research and development, skills, and also when it comes to flexibility in the labor market, like retraining, helping people actually to change careers. And very seldomly, that's what we speak about. We tend to go from individuals' perspective, how people are living their lives and what's their challenges, moving into world of politics, talking about, I want to take control. And that's why I think we have a lot of problems. In one area, and I will stop with that, I think Europe is the front runner in the world when it comes to climate change. Why? Because we are really testing the ground for multilateral, cross-border nation-state answers to climate change. All the rest are saying, well, we do what we like if we like to do something. We have a cross-border, legally binding mitigation effort, which I think should set an example for the world, and we should really take care to control that this works, that we take this responsibility together. And I know nowhere other place in the world that is actually trying to do this with trading schemes and with all our decisions that we are taking inside Europe. There we are really the front runner.
You have certainly heard enough specific issues being raised. Tell us whether you agree with the other speakers.
Thank you for inviting me to take part in this discussion, and thank you for a very interesting, good introduction. I fully agree that European integration, it is a success story, particularly the Poles share that opinion. 87% of Poles are for European integration. I think that the highest number in the European Union. We practically do not have opposition, definitely not in the parliament, of important groups which are against the European Union. If you mentioned about key values, I would say that what is important to maintain these values, traditional values, I will call it economic liberalism and competition, particularly for freedoms of movement of goods, capital, workers and services. Are they any threat to these values? I think they are. It is in the form of protectionism, to limit competition between workers. An example could be a posted workers directive. In our opinion, it is pure protectionism which inhibits the development of the European Union. When you look at the European Union now, you see some countries developing economically quickly. Poland belongs to them, 5% that year economic growth. Other countries which do not develop, they should reform their states, their economics. They do not do it. They break European rules, for example, by not observing budgetary deficit limits. You can call them populists, in order to maintain power, they simply pay more to workers, they do not earn that money, and they simply break European rules. But I think that we mean a different kind of governments. If you define these terms, we will end up with other, so to say, groupings. So you have countries which contribute to the growth of the European Union, therefore to the global role of the European Union. Strong Europe, for me, it is strong economically, with robust economy. This is the Europe we should aim at. And this is the key question. So we discuss liberal rules. Now the term democracy. Sometimes we have difference with definition of that term. For me, democracy is a system, it's a name for the rule of the people. The people elect parliament and they are governed, you can say it as a democratic system, the majority rules. Sometimes we see or we can observe different definitions. For some people, elites, particularly also in Brussels, democracy is the system when people elect the government they like. If they elect another government, you call it populist, for example, yes. So I think the idea of liberal democracy is a very interesting one and should be maintained, but sometimes I see that we try to redefine that in order to fit our ideas. We would be very much in favor of liberal democracy when we stick to traditional definitions. So we have the division concerning that issue. You raised, Prime Minister, very important question. For example, migration. Poland is the country with, I think, the largest group of migrants coming to Poland, almost 2 million Ukrainians contributing to development of our economy. More than 2 million Poles left Poland while we joined the European integration. Very interesting, very important subjects, but we are not seen in the European Union as a country having positive experience concerning that issue. We are ready to share how to deal migration. When we are talking about economic migration, you raise that issue, because when you are talking about compulsory redistribution of refugees, no, we are against. But I agree it is not the problem. So I think that it is important to discuss about values. There's an important time to present the vision of the European Union before the Sibiu summit, and I think that Poland, but also generally Central and East European countries, has something interesting to say about that vision. And it is good to look at it as countries which now, these days, contribute to the growing role of the European Union, and we have to face the problems together which exist in the Western countries. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think this was a clear position. If I can just ask one question, which is, I'm asking it if you want as an academic, but it has very strong political implications. We define as a liberal democracy one in which the majority rules, comma, subject to constitutional limits which guarantee protection of minorities, and rules which are enforced by an independent judiciary. Is that not a set of rules which the EU should defend?
I fully agree with the definition, and I fully support what you just said. There is one important country in the European Union. Recently, a deputy chair of parliamentary faction was elected as a vice president of Constitutional Tribunal and decides in this tribunal about cases he dealt as a politician a few months ago. It wouldn't be accepted in Poland, definitely. But probably you refer to the situation in Poland. Franz Timmermans might refer yesterday to that issue. There is a case and discussion about that in the Council. Enough number of countries share our opinion that our system is in accordance with European law. Therefore, Commission has no possibility to pursue the issue within the country. There are some problems concerning interpretation of our judiciary reform. For example, European Court of Justice decided that part of the report should be reversed, and it was done. That's right, because Poland observes every ruling of the European Court of Justice. So there is a discussion, but at that stage, it looks like a political discussion. For Franz Timmermans, it is an issue. He is a Spitzenkandidat, a leading candidate. It is a part of the program. He has in his group also members from Polish opposition. They are simply in the same group. So the issue was politicized. Generally, I agree, liberal democracy also means not only economic freedoms, but also rights for minorities, support for civic society. But the civic society, how it is represented in that society, that nation, not to impose some liberal values which are not accepted by the societies. As an example, single-sex marriages. It is not accepted in Poland. So we have problem with definitions. Full definition of liberal democracy is somehow implemented, in my opinion, in Poland. The majority has a possibility to reform judiciary system, but it must be done according to certain standards. And it has been done. There is no decision of the Council that something wrong. Even it is no chance for such a decision because everything is okay. If Commission was right, then wouldn't be any problem to pursue to go to another step. So it would be my answer. But we have problems with terms here, and unfortunately, it's politicized.
Thank you.
Well, I don't perfectly agree with my friend, the Polish minister, but I'll take the issue from another corner. Are we aware of the fact that this issue, and not only the issue of liberal democracy, but I would say also the issue of free trade and the issue of peace, even the issue of peace, are at stake in the world today or not? Because my generation was accustomed for several decades to a different opinion. And the changement in the world is rather recent. For example, in June 2010, the American president had a speech in the American University in Cairo about democracy spreading in the Arab world. You remember, the Arab Springs. The idea that we had, more or less, in the last century and at the beginning of the new century was that liberal democracy would become a general shared model. The Nobel Prize Amartya Sen wrote a very relevant book theorizing the fact that no economic success was possible without liberal democracy. So the world now shows a different situation. One, we have a totally alternative model because one of the two main powers of the world, China, shows that, for the moment, shows that economic success is absolutely possible without democracy and without liberal democracy. And this model has an attraction. I'm telling this for the future. If the transatlantic relation will be interpreted only as a transactional negotiating economic issue, we will have problems because this superpower has an economic attraction. If it is not based on values, so we have to relaunch also our transatlantic alliance on values. But the challenge is not only of a completely different model, the Chinese model. We have a challenge also among us, among the democracies. Is it possible, I'm not saying that they are not democratic countries, is it possible to have a democracy with a nuanced idea of liberal principles, or the rule of law, if you want to give this definition, which means the liberty of press, the liberty for minorities, the autonomy of the judiciary, etc., etc. It is not what Brussels should do. This is relevant for us because we are talking in Brussels. It is the idea that we have of the values of Europe. I think this idea of liberal democracy is one of the pillars of the values of Europe. I'm not discussing the procedure on Poland and what France said 2 days ago, but it is not, Minister, frankly speaking, from my point of view, it is not only a political stuff that we are discussing because we are in electoral campaign. It is a trend that we are looking around in several parts of our world, also outside Europe. Just think to Turkey, to mention a neighbor example. The idea that, yes, we have democracy, we have votes every 5 years, but other fundamental principles of the rule of law are optional. I don't think that this could be part of our European value and idea. And maybe we have a different view, and it is useful that we discuss these different views. If we don't have different views, I am happy. Okay.
No, I don't think we have different view, but there is a different. There is simply different evidence. As far as Polish reform of the Polish system, every element of that system was simply taken from other European countries, and they exist. They are not criticized. The problem in the European Union, from our perspective, is that there are double standards. Something which is accepted. Give you example. France can go below 3% of budget deficit. Why? President Juncker said, because that's France. If it comes to Italy, no way. Okay? I am not talking about our situation, but our system, something which in Poland is unacceptable because it is a breach of rule, exists in Germany concerning that case of very active politician being appointed recently member of Constitutional Tribunal. Franz Timmermans, I talked with him many times, he comes to Poland and preaches us about the role of Constitutional Court. Whereas in the Netherlands, there is no such a court because the people think that it's detrimental to democracy. How you can stand that? Yeah? So this is the reason.
I totally,
so the problem is,
100%
but you are right. Democracy is a system, a very important one. I agree. And when we are talking about, I'm also a professor of international relations. There is something that some countries, there is neo-classical realists. They say that sometimes democracy is not efficient. What is important to mobilize resources from society. And countries like Russia, Putin, and China are very good. And we have to unite within the democratic states, I agree, within transatlantic relations to build strong NATO to face that challenge for democracy. And I fully agree, and we share that values. But you, in order for political gains, you just name some countries within the European Union as, I don't know, populist or not democratic or something like that. But it is not the case. The problem is the double standards. It is very difficult. Poland joined with others the European Union 15 years ago. It is still very difficult for Western Europe to accept us as a legitimate member of the European Union. Always this protectionism. This is something we have to change because we contribute to the development of the European Union. The problems are on the West.
Can I perhaps intervene here? A little bit, and I don't want to belittle the problem is big. I mean, everybody of you has kids, right? And if you have more than one, always the question is, do you treat them equally, of different age? Or do you treat them differentially because they are of different age, right?
You need the family to...
Exactly. This is what I want to say now. If we all agree on these principles, and then we have also to agree that there can be conflict over the interpretation of these principles, and that this conflict has to be managed within the institutions which we have. And I think you have said so. If there's a court judgment from the European Court, you accept it. So I think this should be a squabble in the family, right? You know that you want to stick together, and when you have a conflict, so be it. It is just that you try to keep it, if you want, as objective as possible. You don't label the others as populists, and the others don't label you as, I don't know, liberal, whatever, right? But the key thing is we have to accept that we have certain rules, and we always need an arbiter for the rules in the end. And this arbiter is, in the European Union, a bit diffuse. The ultimate arbiter is the European Court of Justice. The political arbiter is the European Council. And we have to accept its legitimacy. And I think if you accept that, I think we can all be with you. And that is part of our European project, that we stick to these rules, we accept the arbitration, we accept the structures. Sometimes they go against, quote unquote, my country, be it 3% deficit rule, be it whatever, employment of foreigners, and so on. But we accept, all of us, that once the European system has taken within its system a certain decision, we accept it.
I fully agree with this, but there is a problem. It is not observed by some observers. For example, you have Article 7. According to this article, Council decides if there is a breach of rule. Council haven't decided yet, and there is no chance for decision because there is no agreement with the opinion of the Commission. And public opinion criticizes this, uses this as a case already decided. Let's observe the rule. Until the decision is issued, please do not attribute negative features to my country in that case. Simply, I agree, let's observe the rules. And Franz Timmermans presents an issue as it was already decided that there is a breach of law. There are no substance for that, for such a, it's not substantiated, such an opinion. So this is, I agree generally, but it is not us who do not observe that.
The public opinion might go one way, but I emphasized earlier, public opinion is one thing. Ultimately, we have European mechanisms, and as long as we accept them, we can complain about public opinion, and there will always be politicians who use certain arguments politically. That's quite clear, but that's, as I said, that's why we have procedures, rules, a European constitution, and in the end, there will be, of course, always a long political fight. It's always a bit dirty, right? But if you all agree, we accept the ultimate decision, then we are okay.
I think the most important thing said here was when Daniel reminded us of the definition of liberal democracy, because there are not just people voting, there are minority rights, there is a freestanding judicial system, individual rights are to be protected. I think we should remember that the big conflict in the world now is that this system is under attack. This is what the different kind of strong leaders are trying to bring down, pushing us into a people concept, not saying that we are any more protected with individual rights, no freedom of expression. That's the real challenge towards Europe, because we are, in this world of today, we are the strongest gathering that should support these basic freedoms. And I think that's one discussion. I hope the European leaders are discussing this and how to explain this or how to preserve this for the European voters. The second decision is how do we treat each other inside European Union, and what about Poland and everything we have heard about now. I think it's not exactly the same discussion. I could tell you I was serving European Council in 8 years. I can tell you a fantastic secret. Germany and France has more influence than the others. And they view the cooperation as, before we take a decision, they should have a greater say than the others. And when we are trying to understand the decision taken, they have greater powers than the others, how we should define it. So that's very disturbing for small and medium-sized countries, because we sometimes have the feeling that the decision-making is that it's given more to some countries, and when we are set to follow the rules, they basically apply more to small and medium-sized countries than to big ones. So is this new to you? And I think it's basically problematic, because I also hear a lot of, shouldn't there be more French and German influence coming to all these elections that we have this year? Fantastic summarize of where we are, I think, if you end up with that position. But all the same, this is not the main problem for Europe, because this we have handled, we know all of this. The main problem is the basic attack on our basic freedoms, because we haven't been defending them the way we need to do now for a very long time. And I think, I hope this is more reflected, and that we stand up in the world towards these giants and not trying to follow what they are doing, but standing for better values.
Very briefly.
Definitely, I'm sure that we are not going to resolve the issues which have been raised today. The fact is, yes, bigger EU member states, smaller EU member states. Our dialogue through citizens also has signaled out that sometimes there's a strong feeling of having double standards. That's true. But this is why we really have to adhere to the mechanisms that are in place in our union, mechanisms to protect our values, our system. And first of all, I would say European Court of Justice is there to be as the legal arbitrator to it. Of course, there is a political mechanism, but then you enter in this political ground, which is not that are not that clear cuts. Let's hope that we'll be able to find our common denominator on the really values that our European Union is based, and that also in the future we'll be able to promote the EU project in that direction. Yeah.
The Minister has to leave, but I hope we can... Many thanks for your spirited defense of a certain approach. I wanted actually to take one issue which Frederick raised, that de facto the rules of the EU apply more to smaller countries. Is that not a good thing? Because most of these rules are healthy for economic growth. Stability and Growth Pact, open borders, competition. So is it really such a big issue that maybe France and Germany have a disproportionate influence and the others have to stick closer to the rules? It might be better for them.
Well, during my experience and also the experience of my predecessors, we have frequent changement in Italy, as you know, of prime ministers. But we have here a minister of finance that was in charge for 4 years, so he is a good testimony. We had no problem of breaking European rules. We have a lot of struggling to give to the European rules the sense that, from our opinion point of view, they should have. But at the end, Italy never had procedures against its decision. We established a sort of way to respect European rules and try to push our economy. What I think is that this is now one of the main problems of our union. We are talking a lot of values. Yes, free trade, multilateralism, the rule of law, so liberal democracy. But also our values should be connected to the future of jobs and of our economy. Because we all know the extraordinary changement that is going on with digitalization and all the consequences of this. This needs, again, a European approach. So what you were asking before, take back control, could have a European answer. Yes, I am perfectly of this opinion. And probably the only real possibility to have back control in the world of the future is a European way. Because if you don't have a European answer to these problems, growth, digitalization, innovation, AI, and so on, you will not at single state level be able to be part of the global competition. It is totally impossible, even for Germany. It is not possible. So again, the choice we have in front of us is, if the new institution will have this choice in front of them, if we decide to keep this path, this kind of stalemate we are in since a few years, or we try a way with a more courageous approach. This will be difficult. The discussion we are having this morning shows the difficulties that we will have, but without having this kind of difficulties, you will always only try to find the minimum in the family, and with the minimum in difficult global times, we are not doing what we should do as Europeans. So we have to be a little bit more ambitious in the next European institution, and I hope in the next Croatian presidency.
Thanks a lot. I think that was a perfect ending to our plenary here. I think we have also outlined already the answer to the question which Barry Eichengreen will put in this room later today, namely the populist temptation. Take back control via a stronger Europe. That might be one answer which could work. Thank you very much.
Grazie.